Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Jonathan Martinez to defeat Jose Aldo because MMA is a young man's game. Don't you forget that. All right, I'll get to that fight in a few minutes, but I'm here to talk about UFC 301, and I'm going to start with the UFC 301 main event. Alexandre Pantoja defeats Steve Erceg. This was a really close fight. I thought it was a toss up until the final minute. In the 25th minute of this fight, that's when I said, all right, Pantoja won. But he really had to scratch and claw to get that victory. I think the story of the fight, for me anyway, is Steve Erceg and how good he looked and what I think of him as a contender and all that. But I'm still going to start by talking about Alexandre Pantoja and just saying, man, this guy, he's got every trait going for him, and they were all there on full display, and that's what got him the victory here. True championship mettle, true grit to outscramble Steve Erceg in the final minute of that fight. Not only to reverse him when Erceg tried to take him down, which I'll get to that in a few minutes. That seems to be the talk of the town. But to keep him on the ground. Steve Erceg was really trying to scramble out in that final minute, and Alexandre Pantoja had just enough cardio strength and everything else and jujitsu to follow Steve Erceg and keep him down. And I thought he definitely won the fight. It was by slowing the fight down with moments like that, but he definitely won, and it was due to true championship grit from Alexandre Pantoja. And yeah, I scored rounds 1, 3, and 5 for Pantoja, and I thought he really had the scratch and claw for rounds 3 and 5. I thought Steve Erceg won rounds 2 and 4 and was very competitive throughout the whole fight, really. I thought he looked incredible. And like I said, I think he's the story of the fight. Steve Erceg, he is an elite fighter. I think he can beat anybody in the world, including Pantoja. I think I'd bet on him as an underdog against anybody in the world, even though there's probably not many fighters against whom he would be an underdog. And I think Steve Erceg is going to be proving himself again at a very high level in his next few fights. This fight made him. He didn't have that signature victory like most fighters do coming into a championship pay-per-view main event fight. But this was his moment, and this made him. He's a made fighter now. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's headlining a fight night event in his next fight. But I know for sure, no matter what the circumstances or placement on the card is, he's going to be fighting an elite fighter in his next fight. And again, I'd give him a shot against anybody, probably favored against most. Steve Erceg, what he showed against Pantoja, he looked better against Pantoja than anybody has since Pantoja's been champion. He looked as good as anybody. I do think you can fault him for going for the takedown in round 5, which, you know what, you have to fault him for because it's the way the fight played out. We all saw it. It's what cost him the fight. But it's not like it was a guarantee that he was going to win the fight without going for the takedown. I thought Pantoja was doing very well in round 5, to be honest. I thought he was doing a lot better than the commentators thought. I think the commentary was a little off last night, specifically Felder and Cormier. I love those guys, and I'm a big John Anik fan. But yeah, they were a little off, just with the Diani Barbosa and the Drakkar Klose fights. I think they were missing the mark there and getting caught up in momentum swings. But either way, this fight had a lot of momentum swings, and Steve Erceg, it's not like he was behind in round 5 either. I think he was just trying to put a stamp on round 5 by ripping Pantoja to the mat. And I'll criticize him with everyone else afterwards because he lost and he looks like a dumbass. And I'm smart because I wouldn't have done that. And it's easy to say all this shit. But I can tell you in round 4, when he ripped Pantoja to the mat for the first time, I think it was the first time anyway. Don't quote me on that. But when he did that, I thought this is a pivotal moment. If he can get Pantoja underneath him and put his bigger frame on top, and Erceg's got good jiu-jitsu, I thought he can take over this fight. Of course, it didn't pan out, but still, in the moment, I think he was trying to put a stamp on it and take Pantoja out of his element. Not that Pantoja can't grapple, but nobody wants to be ripped to the mat when they're tired. And both guys were tired. Both guys were fucking exhausted. But I think he underestimated the energy that Pantoja had in that moment. And Pantoja immediately took over the fight and again out scrambled him in round 5 when he was deep into round 5 and kept him on his back and won the fight and the championship. It's definitely going to haunt Steve Erceg, but I don't think it's stupid decision making. You know, you can say it is, but who knows what he was feeling on the feet. And again, on the feet, rewatch it. It was much closer than people are saying, and the commentators were saying. But anyway, it was a great performance from Steve Erceg, tactical errors notwithstanding. And I think Steve Erceg, again, is a made man after this performance. So hope to see him fight again really soon. I'm sure he's got to recover after a fight like that. But yeah, this guy, he's going to be here for some time, and I can't guarantee he's going to make it back to a title shot. But I'll say I'd be very surprised if he doesn't. Very surprised. He's young enough, and he's got no major physical liabilities. His chin looks as good as ever. And by the way, so does Pantoja's. But yeah, Steve Erceg will be back. And for Pantoja, again, that durability is maybe a little understated in this fight because Steve Erceg's not known as such a killer. But Alexandre Pantoja, to even have a shot at winning this fight in the way he did, you need to have a rock solid chin. And he had that. And he was able to take everything Steve Erceg did, not concede any big moments, getting dropped or anything. A moment like that could be huge. And he kept it tight enough where he was able to neutralize and wrangle Steve Erceg to narrowly outpoint him. Great championship win for Pantoja. Next up, Jose Aldo beats Jonathan Martinez. I picked Martinez, yes, but I didn't bet on him because I had too much respect for Jose Aldo. And I thought Jose Aldo, the way he looked against Merab, which still wasn't bad compared to other Merab victims, but that's not the way he's going to look against anybody else in the world. So as far as I knew, we were getting regular old Jose Aldo, and even at 37 years old, which is pretty old, he's still one of the best fighters in the world, and he next leveled Jonathan Martinez. I thought Martinez looked really good for like a minute or 90 seconds, and then by the end of round 1, I I was sure he was going to lose. I'd forgotten about any success he had. It was just Jose Aldo's fight, and Jose was beating him up. His hands looked great, ripping Martinez everywhere. Those body shots were killer. But in the end, in round 3, when he was a punch or two away from getting a finish, I mean, he had Jonathan Martinez half out of the fight. And in that moment, Jose Aldo finally decides to grapple. I wanted to see him grapple, but I wanted to see it be more tactical and deliberate. This was opportunistic grappling. He had him half out, and he ripped him to the mat, and it was a forceful takedown. And I do think Jose planned on doing more on the ground, but Martinez survived. He reclaimed his guard and slowed the fight down, and whatever. Maybe took some of the wind out of the sails of Jose Aldo, but Jose Aldo was still the man of the hour, the man of the night. I think the crowd was behind him more than anybody. And this was a great reminder that he's one of the best bantamweights in the world. And he's still got a lot of bantamweight momentum. Because again, despite the 2-year layoff, the guy he lost to is fighting for the title next. And the 3 wins before that were against top contenders. Chito Vera, the most recent contender, and Pedro Munoz and Rob Font. So we're top contenders, whatever the fuck they're ranked. But yeah, Jose Aldo, he's one of the best fighters in the world, and I hope he makes another run for the title. He's not far off from a title shot at all. And with his name and, cachet, maybe he gets an extra leg up. Next up, Anthony Smith beat Vitor Petrino by guillotine choke in 2 minutes. This was one of those next level performances. Anthony Smith is a guy who has been there and done that. I've written him off like 7 times in 3 different weight classes. He just shouldn't be here when you look at his record. He should have retired when he was fucking 2-5 or whatever. And he just kept coming, kept coming. He's learned every lesson there needs to be learned, and he's just got too many tricks up his sleeve. Really well versed fighter, better grappler than he is a striker, but he's dangerous everywhere. And Vitor Petrino, even though he's got much more upside at this point, Vitor's got a lot going on offensively, and his ground game's been coming along in the last few fights at the UFC level. So there's not a lot of reason to doubt him. But Anthony Smith put some doubt into my mind here by making him look like he didn't belong in there with him. This was one submission attempt. Anthony Smith locked up a guillotine, and that was it. It happened right away. The first submission attempt, and Vitor was tapping. Anthony Smith is a guy that I thought could have possibly taken over the fight later. I mean, I thought he could have won early as well, but in my head, I thought, all right, if he wins, he's going to be making this a dogfight, slowing Petrino down, maybe ripping him to the mat in the second half of the fight, and blah, 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 blah. But instead, he just next leveled him. Kind of, this was like a Jones Gone type of fight, where it's like, yeah, you can't handle my guillotine. First one he put on, and he got a victory. So, tough loss for Petrino, but an excellent win for Smith. Anthony Smith, a guy that, like I said in the pre-fight video, if he's a 4-1 underdog, I'm betting on him against anybody but John Jones, maybe. And here I bet on him, and his submission line was like plus 1,200. They really got the odds wrong here. Vitor's looked great, but he's still shown some vulnerabilities. Like I said in the pre-fight video, if they had booked this fight immediately after his fight with Anton Turkalj, I think Anthony Smith would have been a favorite. And Vitor Petrino actually won that fight against Turkalj by out-grappling him, but he still showed some weaknesses on the ground himself, and it seemed like something that somebody would exploit down the road. And here it happened with Anthony Smith, the veteran of all veterans, the guy who's in the 50 Fight Club, and he's a former title challenger, UFC main eventer, just all the accolades, and a guy that a lot of people were counting out, shitting on him too because of his, analyst work. He rubbed some fans the wrong way. He's rubbed me the wrong way at times, I'm not going to lie, but you can't take away anything from him as a fighter. This guy's an excellent fighter, and this was one of those Devin Clark type of victories where he next leveled an up-and-comer. I don't know if Devin Clark was an up-and-comer at that moment, but still, great win for Anthony Smith. Michel Pereira defeated Ihor Potieria by guillotine choke. Or no contest, maybe? No, I don't know. He landed that knee. You know what? I don't want to discourage fighters from throwing shit like that. If the knee lands, it lands. You're going for some flippy Sakuraba type of shit, I want to reward that. I don't want to dissuade and discourage fighters from doing backflip knees. But apparently it grazed his head or whatever the fuck. I don't know what happened, and it was just ruled a guillotine victory. But controversy aside, this is another 1-minute finish at middleweight for Michel Pereira. The guy had a lot of momentum as a welterweight. His win streak was twice as long, but here at middleweight, his wins are all very quick. I mean, all 3 of them are in a minute pretty much. Petrosky, what's his face, Oleksiejczuk, and now Potieria. They may not be the best wins, but they're all solid wins, and he's beaten them like no one else has beaten them. He's dominated these guys. And he got 2 submissions. The last one of Oleksiejczuk, just like this one over Potieria, where he could have knocked the guys out because he hurt both them early. And instead, his submission skills are there for him. It just shows he's got so much danger going on when he's firing on all cylinders that you're in trouble if he has you even half hurt. And here he just steamrolled Ihor Potieria. Ihor Potieria, a guy who was fighting at 35 pounds greater than Michel Pereira a year ago or whatever, maybe a little longer. But here he wasn't able to make use of any physical advantages. which I think most of them lie with Michel Pereira, but height and reach and all that lie with Pereira, and he just wasn't able to make any of it. Pereira made this an athletic battle early and was just too, I think, even strong for him, but definitely too powerful. Michel Pereira, the guy's a force. I want to see him fight somebody huge next time. A top fighter in the world. Can't think of him, whatever, but I want it to be one of the best fighters in the world. I want to see this guy go against somebody that is undisputedly awesome. And Pereira, I don't know. I think he's going to stick around the UFC, but he's definitely a vulnerable fighter. He's a guy who, the next time I talk about him, you'll just hear me express more doubt. He can be hurt, he can be tapped, and whatever. Just a lot of doubt with him, but yeah, he'll stick around. Kyle Bahayo knocked out Paul Craig 2 minutes into round two. This was a great performance from Kyle Bahayo. I thought pretty quickly, I realized that this was going to be the Kyle Bahayo show, and Paul Craig was going to be reduced to the, butt scooting and guard pulling and all that. This was a jiu-jitsu fighter versus an MMA fighter. And of course, Paul Craig's got a lot of other skills, but when you put him in there in a cage, locked in there with Kyle Bahayo, he's reduced to a guard pulling, butt scooting grappler. And he wasn't able to impose himself at all. And Kyle Bahayo was beating him up. I thought he was halfway to a knockout at times in round one, but then in round two, he just cracked him. And Paul Craig, his chin is just not meant to last. It's a big liability moving forward if he is moving forward. And he should, because he's got a lot of great skills, but he's got to be careful, be very prudent, because he's got to watch out for his health. This guy's had a lot of concussions on camera, which is supposed to imply that he's got more off camera, because who the fuck doesn't? These guys are training every day. But yeah, tough loss for Paul Craig. I love Paul Craig as a fighter, but he was just really up against it here against Kyle Bahayo. I wanted to see them hit the mat, where I still think Bahayo would have won, but instead he took away all the danger from Paul Craig and just beat him up until he put him away, and he got a beautiful knockout. Great win for Caio. This was a fight where I said this in the Oleksiejczuk fight as well, but this is a fight where he needs to get a finish, and on both occasions he got a finish. Whereas he doesn't always do that at the UFC level, but he came through here in a big way. So great main card knockout for Kyle Bahayo. And then we got Joe Anderson Brito beat Jack Shore. I do think Joe Anderson was going to win this fight anyway, but I just have to say, that cut on the leg. I don't like seeing cuts anywhere when they're that deep and gruesome, but yeah, just seeing a guy get his leg split open by someone else's leg, it was something else. Pretty gross. Tough loss for Jack Shore. I think there's still a chance he was going to turn the fight around, just because I know, I trust he has good cardio. And although, like I said in the pre-fight video, my doubt in Joe Anderson Brito's cardio isn't as heavy as maybe it is for some others. But still, I've seen the Bill Algeo fight, and I'm aware Jack Shore still had something to offer in this fight. But I still think Joe Anderson Brito was leading the dance the whole way. I thought he looked really good, and I don't think he was going to slow down. I think he had to be hurt to be slowed down, or ripped to the mat, I suppose. But I think he was just a step ahead of Jack Shore. Step ahead, too good, dangerous, powerful, explosive everywhere. And this was a good win for him that kind of got, marred a little bit by the finish, because it is a doctor stoppage and he didn't take his opponent out of the fight. But he still looked phenomenal. And with a few more opportunities, maybe he could have taken him out of the fight. I don't know. But yeah, I don't consider this a major loss for Jack Shore. I'll always describe it as a loss and say that, yeah, he was on his way to losing, in my opinion, but they were halfway through the fight or thereabout, and Jack Shore did not get finished. I wouldn't count this as a finish. Unless his leg starts getting split open in every matchup, then I'll say it's a major weakness of his. But anyway. Yasmin Lucindo beat Karolina Kowalkiewicz. She looked really good here. Yasmin Lucindo, really good. striking advantage, grappling advantage, just too explosive, too athletic for Carolina to deal with. Way too athletic. This reminded me in a way of like a Tabitha Ricci versus Jillian Robertson type of fight. But Yasmin was just so much faster and better everywhere. Carolina was tough, but she was a step and a half behind, and she was largely neutralized throughout this whole fight. Really couldn't get going, didn't do much to turn the fight in her favor, and yeah, kind of just cruised to a decision loss. I make it sound like she wanted to lose or whatever. Pretty tall order when you got a fighter as good as Yasmin Lucindo in front of you, but still, Karolina Kowalkiewicz wasn't resourceful enough to even make this close. And for Lucindo, pretty tall order to put Karolina Kowalkiewicz away, so I don't fault her there. But yeah, she's a girl that I still think has great skills everywhere. I think she's more dangerous than she showed here. She'll probably get some nice finishes in the future, but here she beat a girl that, even though she's got her good share of losses, Carolina, only very, very good fighters, some of the best fighters ever, have beaten her. And Yasmin Lucindo at 20, whatever the fuck years of age, 21, 22, 23, but she got it done. Looked really good. Next up, Moitebek Orolbai. I'm going to call him Miktebek because Moitebek, I don't know. Orolbai beat Brenner by, this was unanimous decision. I thought it would have been majority. I forget what happened. I remember the point deduction. But either way, I thought he largely won this fight, was largely dominant, but Brenner still made a great battle out of it. Great battle, not only forcing him to grab the fence and have a point taken, but taking over in round two. Brenner got him down and secured the mount and created a big moment for him at round two. And in round three, he had some moments as well, but Orolbai was just better largely throughout the whole fight. Really beat him up. I thought he was going to get a knockout in the first half of the fight. I mean, while watching the fight in the first half, I thought he was going to get a knockout. Beforehand, I wasn't predicting him to get a knockout. I thought he'd win a decision. But his striking was really sharp in this fight. Some good straight punches, really catching Brenner off guard. I thought Brenner was on his way to losing, but losing via knockout. But Brenner kept himself safe and kept himself grounded, really. Miktebek Orolbai was too much for him wrestling wise. You know, he was striking his way into takedowns and ripping him to the mat. And Elvis Brenner lost a wrestling battle. That was the basis for this loss here. I thought he showed good skills and made it competitive. And, you know, when I thought he would have been finished in the first half of the fight, he showed much better cardio and whatever, and looked better in the second half of the fight, but still was a step behind largely throughout the whole fight. And Orolbai, despite looking like he was going to falter and let the fight get away from him, he proved to be a really gritty fighter and have good 15-minute cardio. Even if he slowed down and whatever, all of his traits were there, and he was able to walk away with a clear victory despite giving up a point and having many dicey moments. So great battle between two really good fighters that are probably going to be around for a long time, if I had to guess. But Orolbai, he's really got my attention. You know, this wasn't the most dominant performance like he had against Medic, but the guy's awesome, and this was a great victory. He beat a guy that Guram Kutateladze and Zubaira Tukhugov weren't able to beat. Even if, again, I thought the Tukhugov fight was a robbery. Next up, Jakar Klose beat Joaquim Silva by decision. This was a fight that I thought was close, but I thought Klose. I'm not even trying to use these fucking puns. It was close enough, but I thought Jakar Klose won the fight. I thought he won rounds 1 and 2. And in round 3, Joaquim Silva just seemed like he wouldn't be denied. That guy, he's a fucking strong fighter, really athletic guy, and he was firing on all cylinders in the third round. And I thought making him a really difficult guy to control. But Jakar Klose was still throwing back, even if he was, eating some more dangerous shots from Joaquim Silva. And he kept himself safe from any big moments, kept the round tight, 10-9 round, And I thought he did enough in the first two to clearly win a 29-28 decision. This was one of the fights where the commentators were saying that Joaquim Silva was winning round two, just like they were saying for Karackeite winning round two against Diani Barbosa. I thought they did better, each fighter, than they did in round one, but I still thought that they both lost round two. I thought Jakar close, and as I'll get to, Diani Barbosa won round two. But anyway, it was a very close fight. Another hard-earned decision victory for Jakar Klose at the UFC level. And for Joaquim Silva, good look for him losing a fight and not getting finished, I suppose. And a really good look for him in making this fight very close in the end, where the first half of it wasn't so close. But I thought he definitely lost. As did I for Jamie Mullarkey. I thought he definitely lost to Mauricio Ruffu, not Hoofy, like I was saying in the pre-fight video. But Ruffu looked phenomenal here against Jamie Mullarkey. Mullarkey probably landed some punches. I don't really remember it. This was just the Mauricio Ruffu show from the beginning. I thought he was going to knock out Mullarkey a lot earlier than he did knock him out because he was landing from the beginning. Looked really sharp, and Mullarkey had to get his striking going to get his wrestling going, and he could never get past that first hump, get over that first hump. And he was destined to lose this fight by knockout. And that's what happened. Took almost a full round, but still happened within a round. And Jamie Mullarkey now he's got 6 TKO losses, I believe. He's he's definitely not long for the UFC, and probably not long for MMA. I think he should definitely look after himself. Just like I was saying for Paul Craig, you got to be prudent in these situations. I know they're fighters. This is how they make money, and they can go headline fights on the regional scene even when they're done with the UFC. And this is their career, but still, this is your chin. This is your brain. This is your brain on fucking drugs. Be careful. But for Mauricio Ruffu, he looked fucking awesome. Got a beautiful finish, and I can't wait to see that guy fight again. I was really high on him coming into this fight. I can't say really high on him as a prospect, but as a fighter to watch, as an entertainer. And this guy brought it here. I think when he wins, it's always going to look like that. He's going to be finishing guys with strikes. Next up, Diani Barbosa beat Ernesto Karackeite. And this was a really close fight, but I still thought, like I said, Diani Barbosa won round two. And she definitely won round one. But in general, this fight went Barbosa's way early and Karackeite's way later. I thought Karackeite really impressed me with her cardio. I thought she did kind of take over this fight. She was the last woman standing, and you'll hear me mention that the next time I break down one of her fights. But this was a close fight and one that finally went against her because her last 5 fights have been very close, like 4 split decisions, draws, and whatever. And I thought she won all but one of them. But this one here, it was close, but I thought she lost this one as well. Barbosa looked really good early on. I thought she looked really good on the feet. I thought she was getting the better of Ernesto on the feet early on, landing some beautiful strikes, but then ripping her to the mat and having a distinct advantage there. But the advantage started dissipating in round 2, where she still won, in my opinion. But the point is, by round 3, she was a step and a half behind. Karackeite wasn't able to make a 10-8 round out of that, wasn't able to get her nearly out of there, but she gave herself a shot. And you need a lot of great traits as a fighter to give a performance like that. So Karackeite, my estimation of her kind of goes up here, even though I thought she lost the fight. And for Barbosa, I can't say my estimation of her as a fighter goes down, but you'll definitely hear me talk about her cardio in my next breakdown of her. That's how she lost. I mean, she lost to Josiane Nunes, who hits like Vanderlei Silva, but still, cardio was a part of that. And the same goes for her fight against Jenna Bishop, who might have just been a bad matchup because she's a jiu-jitsu monster, but Diana Barbosa fell off a little bit in that fight. And in this fight here, she got the victory, but in round 3, she was not the last woman standing. So it's part of her profile, and I'm aware she is the girl that outlasted Karine Silva in their fight. And we had Ishmael Bonfim beating Vince Pichel. This was a beating. I thought Vince Pichel was a step and a half behind here, and I thought he was going to get finished the way this fight was going. Like I said, I've never seen him knocked out aside from the slam from Rustam Khabilov with a takedown. But here he was getting pieced up like no one's pieced him up. Ishmael Bonfim was beating him up. The guy's got such sharp boxing, and it was completely dominant in this fight aside from like the first 2 minutes where I thought Pichel was doing well, landing some good kicks and whatever. But largely, this was Vince Pichel getting his ass kicked. And if nothing else, he showed his toughness, even at age 40, whatever he is. And he wasn't able to outlast Bonfim, wasn't able to ground him, wasn't able to hurt him at all. This was pretty much a one-sided ass kicking, but Pichel took it. So there's that. But this was not a great performance. And for Ishmael Bonfim, this was a great performance. This was his best victory as of yet, although maybe some people would say Terrence McKinney, but I'd say Vince Pichel, even at age 40 . And he looked good for all 15 minutes. He's a guy that has fought long, unlike his brother. He's won some good fights, winning decisions against decent fighters. And this was just another example of that. In all these decisions, he hasn't faced the most adversity, but still, he's got reliable cardio and he can throw down hard for 15 minutes. And that's what he did here. Really beat up Vince Pichel, got back on the win track in a big way. And Vince Pichel, I don't know where he's going from here, but at least he's not a 41-year-old who got knocked out. So there's that. And in the first fight of the evening, Alessandro Costa beat Kevin Borjas. This was a great fight. I thought round one was really close. I thought Costa stole round one with a knockdown in the end, or maybe he just landed a big punch or whatever. I forget exactly what happened. But I thought Kevin Borjas was very competitive early on, and Costa barely stole round one and then took over the fight with that leg kick in round two. I'm sure he landed other ones before that I wasn't paying attention to, but that one kick he landed in round two, that just took him completely out of the fight, Kevin Borjas. It was an excellent win for Costa because he got to show everything. Once he did knock him down, he went on top of him and forced a jiu-jitsu match with Borjas. I did think Costa had much better grappling, but especially against a compromised fighter, he was shining. And he went through Kevin Borjas's guard and almost got a submission, I believe. Oh no, he didn't go get a submission. The arm was kind of hanging there, but he just pounded him. Advanced position, pounded him. Kevin Borjas had nowhere to go. He was fucked even if he stood on the feet. He was probably better off on the ground being fucking mounted, but it still just wasn't meant to last. And Costa went through him pretty quickly on the ground. Excellent win for Alessandro Costa, especially taking over round one in the end like that. Although they both landed good shots in the end. Each guy landed like a flying knee and whatever. But still, Costa's a guy who I think was underrated coming into this fight. Now he's just 2-2 in the UFC. Of course, his two losses are to Steve Erceg and Amir Albazi. Pretty much both of them are title challengers. Amir Albazi's one fight away. But the guy is underrated, and he had too much for Kevin Borjas. I thought his best chance of getting a finish was on the ground, but I thought it would have been more conventional with a takedown. But here, even though the finish did take place on the ground, I attribute this finish to his stand-up. Costa turned the fight around striking-wise, hurt him with his chin, hurt him with his legs, and won this fight in emphatic fashion. Great win for Alessandro Costa. And for Kevin Borjas, this is his first TKO loss, I believe, as an amateur or pro, even though he's been hurt. But a whole new wrinkle to his profile. I think he's tough, but he was definitely outgunned here. So, tough loss for him. I'm sure he'll get another shot. And that wraps it up for UFC 301. This was a very good event. But as far as pay-per-view goes, especially in the wake of UFC 300 and 299, You can consider this a dog shit pay-per-view if you want, but it was still a great night of fights altogether. And we got to see the return of Jose Aldo. Anthony Smith come through in a big way as an underdog, which even if you didn't bet on him, I'm sure you were at least somewhat pleased to see him do that. I like seeing the veterans win as underdogs. And of course, we got an excellent main event. There was no fight of the night as far as the bonuses go from the UFC, but Pantoja Erceg is my pick. A 5-round war that was settled in the 25th minute. And again, Steve Erceg looked phenomenal as Pantoja. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.